All right, a while ago, I did a list with Alex from Board Game Co. about the player count being a lie. These are the games that lie to you. These are the games that want to just wish ill upon your entire family. And today, I'm going to right that wrong. And this one is the player count is a truth. I wanted to highlight some games that I know of that play very well at all different player counts and sort of go through the list and really highlight some games that I think are unique in that fact that they do play well at that wide range of games. So I have 10 games for you, but I really have more than that. I have probably 20. One important thing to note is that also recently I did another list with about the top 10 games for 6 players, and so I eliminated quite a few of those from the list for this one. Viticulture would have been a great honorable mention. I think this one really scales quite well for 1 to 6 players. I don't really play solo. I should preface this by saying I don't really play solo, but I also have heard great things about the solo mode. Like the Viticulture solo mode is very well regarded. I'd rather be over here. So Viticulture is out. Heat, Pedal to the Metal is another one that I think plays really well from 2 to 6. You wouldn't think it would play well at 2 being a racing game, but the way that they put those automated opponents in actually makes it pretty fun. You can try that out on Board Game Geek. Libertalia, Winds of Galecrest also has a really nice 2-player mode, and the simultaneous action selection of this game makes a frenetic, fun game at any player count. I find the player count to really give a representative game experience. And then finally, Keyflower. Keyflower is another one that plays 2 to 6. And I think it works. It works as a crunchy Euro at 6. There's a lot going on. You're going to see all of the tiles at 6. At 2, it really works as a memory battle of what does my opponent have? How can I get ahead of the opponent, etc. So like Keyflower is another great suggestions, but none of these are on the list. None of these are on the official list. I should save them for the honorable mentions, but you know, I like to give you all some value right off the beginning. Those are all really good games and really good candidates, but I have 10 different ones. One that I might change as we're talking about it to give like a slash because it's a similar feeling. But we're going to start with that right now. Again, prefacing that I don't really play solo games, so probably haven't played these at solo. First up, coming in at number 10, we have Reviving Kathmandu. Now, Reviving Kathmandu is by Lemery Games. It's a game which I have with me right now. Comes in this little suitcase, can flip out, open with a lovely magnetized sheet, dual layer player boards. It's a very nice production, like really good quality. And it is this fun bidding game where you are assembling a set collection, essentially. So in a full game, you'll use this entire board, and whenever you bid a chip, you're going to put it face down, and the highest chip will take all the cards in their row. You're going to get 2 cards every round. Now, if, for example, this is an example of a 6-player game, you can see that red is bidding on these 2 cards that are beside each other, blue bidding on those cards, etc. So if yellow's number and blue's number is higher than red's number, red will also get some less exciting cards. They'll be a bit more random, they'll only have 1 color on them, and red won't have been able to prepare for those cards. But you're trying to make towers in the same color, essentially. If you do, you get a good chunk of bonus points. You want them to all line up in the same color, and you're building, you know, towers of 3, towers of 2, towers of 4, and the Buddhas, which are just one-offs. It's a fun little game. Everybody has a chip from 1 to 5, and you'll do it over the course of 8 rounds. And so you will play 4 of your chips and have 1 left over, and then you'll get that many points, or you can use that on a card from the discard pile. Generally, it's always better to take a card from the discard pile, even if you have the number 5 for points, but it provides a really fun balance of, oh, I really want to keep my number 5. It's going to give me 5 extra bonus points, but then I don't have my most powerful chip to bid. And so I quite enjoy it. I thought it was a really fun production. I think it's the best thing that Lemery Games has done. I think it's absolutely their best title. And just the way this board is structured, if you're playing a sort of 4 or less player game, you only use this mat of 4. It expands well with 5. The decisions are tight. You're always fighting for specific cards and against each other. And so the battle and the bidding is really tight, but it feels fun at all sorts of player counts. I didn't find the set collection to be that intuitive, but the bidding aspect of it is quite fun. And so that's our number 10. Now, number 9, I put this in here because I've heard really good things about the solo mode, Distilled. I kind of also want to pivot to Earth because this represents some of the only simultaneous play games that I'm putting on the list. Both of these play the same at most player counts. Earth plays exactly the same. You just have to wait more turns for it to come back around to you, and you will trigger your own follow actions a little bit more. So maybe not exactly the same. Small differences, but not really that significant. And Distilled plays very much the same as well. The only difference is that you are going to have this market in the middle. And so there might be a little bit more competition above the market with more players and a little bit more cycle, but a little bit more downtime. Generally, these games play fairly similarly, as do a lot of modern Euros, I will say. There's a lot of Euro games that have that sort of same feeling that I'm leaving out of this list because they don't have a wide player range. I'm trying to not put anything that's just 2 to 4, so at least both of these come up into the 5 player count range. And I think if you're looking for a game that plays well at all player counts, if you are actively looking for a game that will play well, looking for something that has this simultaneous play will give you a fairly consistent experience. And so this is sort of my honorable mention. I still wanted to put it lower on the list. I wasn't that happy with picking Distilled, but because it is more of a solo game, like games that where you're building your own thing. Unfair could fall into this category, but Unfair drags slightly at 5 players, but you do have more cards to cycle through. It will play well if all players know the game. But there are a lot of these games that I think fall into this category, and what I'm trying to pick are games that also have, shouldn't work well at these player counts, but do. And so these ones should work well at these player counts and do, and so that's why they're on the list as sort of like the 9 honorable mention. But, let's move on to more exciting pastures. Number 8 is Hanabi. Hanabi plays 2 to 5 players, and I think it is great at all player counts. It is a game where you cannot see your hand of cards. You can see everybody else's hand of cards, and you have to communally play the cards from your hand in ascending order from 1 to 5 in 5 different color stacks. So you have to be hinting to everybody around the table, and the amount of people playing Hanabi drastically changes the game. I love Hanabi as a 2-player game. I think this is a really, really fun style of game. You can really get in a flow and get some vibing with your partner and develop that hidden language. And so I play this game a lot with my partner Renee, and we know we've played it so much that we know what is going to happen when I hint this. If I'm hinting in this way, what does this mean? And we're just trying to find that back and forth and trying to find the efficiency of the clues. As a larger group, it's all about working together, and not everybody is going to have the same shared language. And so it's finding that balance of, okay, who needs to be clued? Who needs a hint right now? Who knew things about their card? And it's like, please don't hint me. Nah, that's a stone cold poker face right there, baby. Really simple game, but this is your perspective when you're playing. You do not know what is there until somebody helps you out. But I find it is a game that really drastically changes depending upon the number of players in terms of more difficult or less difficult. Again, trying to find that communal language amongst more people is always going to be harder, but I think it is a cool experience, and I like those changes as you go through. So Hanabi for me made the list. Number 7 is a auction game and a bidding game, again, that shouldn't work at 2 players. Now, it is 2 to 4, and I said I wasn't going to put any 2 to 4, but because there is an expansion, Furnace Interbellum, which takes it up to 5 players, and also it works well at 5. 1 to 5, it adds in a solo mode, and the fact that this game can work at 2 players is mind-boggling to me. You're going to lay out a row of cards, and you're going to bid on these cards, and if somebody bids a 4, you can't bid your 4. You can only have 1 number on a card and only 1 color on a card, so you can't underbid yourself. And why you might want to underbid, because the largest number gets the cards, but the underbid gets a bunch of resources times that number. So in this case, red is going to get 6 coal because you can see that there's 2 coal up top here, and 2 times 3 is 6. That's a little math lesson for you. What is really, really neat about the 2-player mode, and I played the 2-player mode, is this idea of the automated opponent actually really working. They roll a dice, And that is the card on which they will bid. They'll start bidding at 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, or they'll start bidding 4, 3, 2, 1. I kind of forget. It doesn't matter. They start bidding in a specific order, and so you knowing that order can kind of play the probabilities and say, okay, I want to make sure that I get this one locked in. I want to make sure that I don't get overbid here. They only have these numbers left. What are we going to do? And so I went into a really exciting manipulation of the system. I was like, okay, because if it can't be put there, it'll go then to the next one. Just in player order, and it'll keep on doing a loop until a legal placement can be had. I was like, all right, perfect. The automated thing has already dropped it in the first 3. It can either drop it in number 4 or it can drop it in number 6. And so I kind of forced it so that if it rolled any number, it would have to drop it in number 4. So I put something in 6 that made it happen so that it would cycle around and drop it in 4 exactly where I wanted it to, so that I could get the bonus and not win the card. And being able to predict that felt really satisfying, and I was so surprised that Furnace did work that well. And then I played it at 5 too. The 5th player is easily added in with the expansion. They added an additional dial and some additional spaces, but really good, easy implementations. Very impressed with Furnace and how it scales at those player counts, especially being a bidding and an auction game. Number 6, on the bottom half of our list, we have Puerto Rico. Now, it says 3 to 5 players. There was a 2-player mode, an unofficial 2-player variant. So how this went is that there was a 2-player mode that was designed by the designer, and then it just didn't get onto the box or into the rules set. Like, it was designed, but it didn't make it through like the printing process. And then as it has been on Board Game Geek, that design has come through, and people now know about it and people play it. In fact, you can actually play that on Board Game Arena. Essentially what it does is it only gives you 1 of each building, because the buildings are limited depending upon the number of people, specifically the buildings of the coffee and the indigo plants, etc. And so in the 2-player mode, it really changes the amount of buildings that are available. Usually there's 2 of every type of building, and in the 2-player mode there's only 1. And so you're fighting for those buildings, and that makes the count very variable. And I also find this, because it has the follow action, where I take something and everybody else takes that bonus action, the flow of the game does change drastically just based upon the amount of actions that will happen in a given turn. In a 3-player game, you're always going to start with the same actions. You know, you're going to buy something, you might get some fields, and you might populate those fields, or maybe you'll produce right on the field. It's a fairly by rote start, but then that changes with 4, and then that changes with 5. And I think those changes are interesting. I still think this is a good game, even though there has been a decent deal of controversy in terms of it was re-implemented as Puerto Rico 1897, and then the person who helped with that re-implementation, who really pushed for it and made it happen, they did such a horrible job production quality-wise with 1897. That's why I haven't picked it up, because I was waiting for the second printing, because I knew it was just such a bad quality job. Like, they left out words on the tiles. It just was an almost unusable thing, which is so like done dirty. And Jason Perez has a couple videos about why he no longer supports Puerto Rico 1897 when it was his sort of brainchild from the first place. I think it boils down to like they didn't give him enough credit, but I don't know. I don't know because I haven't yet watched the videos. You can go watch those videos too. I know it is also getting a reprint this year from Awakened Realms, getting the Castles of Burgundy treatment. And so I figured it was worth talking about again, because I think people will be interested in it. And to its credit, I think it plays very well at all of the player counts, and even the 2-player mode. I don't know if that'll be included in the Awakened Realms. It probably will be, and they'll probably try to find some way of simulating a solo mode. But I think it is worth noting as playing in an interesting way at all player counts. And in a way that if you don't know the game, you can just royally screw it up and give the person who goes next a colossal advantage. Moving along to number 5, we have this in the 4X genre. We have Galactic Era. Galactic Era is a fantastic game. It really is. I wonder, yeah, awesome. Look, it's awesome. This is how you do 4x in space. This is so much better than Twilight Imperium, and it plays very well at all of these player counts. I haven't played it yet at 2. I have seen there is a new variant for 2. There was one included in the rulebook, and then they said, nah, we don't like that. We're going to change it and make a better one. And anytime that a company or designer actually does that and switches it up, that gives me a little bit more faith in it, even though I haven't tried it personally. But I have played this at 3 and I have played it at 6. I've seen the variants of these games, and the basic change for each one of these is just the setup. You'll see here this is set up a bit for 3 players. You can tell that it's set up for 3 players because there's a central galaxy, and then there's 1 off to the side, 2 off to the side, 3 off to the side. You'll also see that there are these little wormholes which will connect one galaxy to the other. So no matter what happens and no matter what player count you have, you are always close to 2 people. This is a great, it's great fun. It's the different races feel fun. There's a light side and a dark side, a service to self, service to others, good and evil essentially. And when you're good, you can do certain things and that helps you get more population. When you're bad, you can kind of just overthrow populations and succumb them to your will, but you have a harder time making alliances. There's a fun tech tree that feels very powerful on every level. The amount that you have feels just so, so good. Your ships are flying around and they're secret. They might be filled to the brim with troops, or they might just have one lowly troop and a bunch of dummy troops as the ship trails a bunch of crash test dummies behind them in hopes that you think that they are large enough to scare away a bear, which I only wish my family was large enough to do that. Yeah, there's a little bit better view of a 3-player game as you go and expand and try to expand your population and put them on the board. It's really fun, and I liked seeing it play well at 3 and at 6, especially at 3 because you can have a nice 4x experience with 3 players, and I think that doesn't happen. That really doesn't happen in Twilight Imperium. I've played Twilight Imperium 3 at 3 players, and the joy of the game is that you're supposed to have so many players. I think Twilight Imperium probably plays the same at all player counts too, but I haven't played it at 6, nor will I ever, because I would much rather play Galactic Era or Dune. Dune, coincidentally, made it on the 6-player list, but doesn't make it on this one. I don't think Dune is good at anything less than 5 players because I love the talking, I love the intrigue, I love the swings back and forth. Now, moving along to number 4, we have Roll for the Galaxy. And I picked Roll for the Galaxy instead of Race for the Galaxy because apparently Race for the Galaxy only plays 2 to 4 players, where I could have sworn that an expansion puts it up to 5 players. But Roll for the Galaxy and Race for the Galaxy play pretty similarly. This also has a bit of a follow action and comboed with simultaneous play, and that's why I enjoy the game. So very similar to Race for the Galaxy, you're going to try to get 12 planets or developments out there, but in this one, instead of spending cards and choosing those actions, these actions that are flipped up and face down so that everybody can see what's happening, you are going to roll your dice behind your screen, and you are going to get to assign one of your dice to an action to make sure that that action happens, and then you are going to assign the other dice, whichever symbols that they come up on, underneath specific actions. So if somebody else takes that action, you can do it to the X amount of power. There are ways of manipulating your dice so that you have more flexibility. There are ways of getting more dice, and of course there is a cycle of cooling down your dice, putting them back into your cup, and trying to upgrade your little baby white ones into better ones that have the symbols on them that you want. You can also always change one dice into something different. So it gives you a bit of flexibility. If you want to pick the thing that you want, you can do that for sure, but then you are relying upon the dice rolling in your favor to use them as power rather than having a hand of cards and getting rid of them. I find it a bit annoying to always be drawing tiles from the bag, because I find cards and the cycle that you need in Race for the Galaxy. I prefer Race for the Galaxy, really, for this title, but I only picked Roll for the Galaxy because it said it played up to 5 players. However, I do really like in Race for the Galaxy when you are playing the 2-player game of this, you get to pick 2 things. If you're playing Race for the Galaxy on Board Game Arena, add 2 players, it'll take you like 7 minutes. It's a really good filler. You get to pick 2 of those actions, right? And so I find both trying to anticipate what your opponents are going to be doing, what are they going to be choosing, are they going to be setting you up for something specific, and picking the thing that you get the special version of. I find that balance to be very fun, and I find it to shift depending upon the number of players that you are playing with. So that's why it falls into number 4. Number 3 is a game for 2 to 8 players. And you can see the community says 2 to 7 players is great. It's best with 5, but it can support 2 to 7. This is Citadel. Citadel is a great small little game. You are going to get a hand of cards. You will get these 8 cards essentially, and you will get to choose which one to keep. And then you pass that to the next person. Of course, if you're the king, you get to see all the cards, or only one is off to the side. And you get to choose one of these things, and you pass it off. And they all have different abilities, and they all activate in this order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the Warlord acts last. You are then going to use these abilities to purchase cards. Each card will have a number of coins, how much it costs. You want to get a certain number of buildings in front of you. I think it's something like 6 or 8 to trigger the end of the game. If you do, you get an extra additional point, or a few points. But a lot of the fun of the game is, depending upon the player count, that depends on how many cards you throw away and you don't know actually exist in the game. And so it's sort of trying to anticipate what your opponents have picked. What have they left you with? The thief and the assassin, they get to choose a role that's out there and steal from them. But if that role isn't out there, then they don't get that action to go through, right? Or they've just murdered you and they make you end your turn. And so finding that balance and using these abilities effectively, swapping hands, it's a really solid game that's a bit crunchier than one might expect. And that works really, really well at a wide variety of players. I just think it's so impressive that for 2 to 7, it is essentially recommended. Right? Not recommended at 2, 46.7, but recommended for 34.1 and best at 19.2% of 2, right? Like everything outweighs the not recommended category other than 8. And I think the fact that a game can do that and still have some semblance of strategy and feels different because of the different roles or the amount of roles that are out there, for sure deserves to be on this list. Now, number 2 is something I feel very excited about. And that's Lords of Waterdeep. It still ranks 88 on Board Game Geek. Lords of Waterdeep is a great introduction to worker placement. And the reason it's up so high on this list is because of how vastly different the feel is at 2 players versus 5 players. At 5 players, you only get 2 agents. You get 2 workers that you can put onto this board space. That's not a lot of workers. And then you unlock your 3rd worker once you hit round 5. But at 2 players, you get 4 workers, and then you're going to get a 5th worker. And so the amount that you can do, like the scores that you will have, depending upon the player count, is so monumentally huge that I just had to put it on. And I had to go over and see my beautiful Builder Lord, which I draw the Builder Lord over 50% of the time that I play this game. It is a 1 in 11 chance, and I draw it over 50% of the time. What can I say? I just love building buildings. But yeah, Lords of Waterdeep is a classic for a reason. It should still be a classic. It has no theme, even though it is Dungeons & Dragons themed. There is no theme. These cubes are not priests. They are white cubes. These are not rogues or wizards. They're black or purple cubes. But there is a really satisfying loop about trying to optimize your worker placement in a way that's not overly complicated, that's really good if you're just getting to hobby, and that it provides such a vastly different experience while being sort of an intro or a less complex game. Like, what's the complexity? 2.45 as complexity. I think no higher than that for sure. It's cool that then you can, so many people who have this game will then see, wow, this really does play differently at all player counts, but have a different experience based upon the player count. I think that is the true core of this list, and that is why it is up so high. Now, number 1 is the game that I made this list for. This game plays incredibly well, incredibly consistent, and differently for 2 to 8 players. It's hitting that 2 to 8 player mark. This is a social deduction game that works at 2, legitimately works at 2, and that is Veiled Fate. People say that it's best at 6. Yeah, I could see that. I almost said I disagree. I think it might be best at 4. Or, you know what? I think it's actually best at 2. I really do think out of this player count that it might be best at 2, but you can see the strain of recommended These people don't know what they're talking about. It is a great game at 2. The only thing where they don't say it's good is that at 2, and I can absolutely prove them wrong. You're going to get one of these gods, and you're going to root for them. You want purple to win. You want purple's track to move up the furthest at the end of the game. But people don't know that you have purple, and so while it's very easy to just move the purple one and give them points, everybody's watching to see who you are manipulating and what tracks you are manipulating. And that is where the fun of the game comes in. If you like games with above-the-table interaction is how I describe it. That is what Ivy Studio games are best for. Games where the players create the experience. I think it's absolutely worth checking out. It is expensive and overly so, but it is a really fun experience around the table. I find maybe you could make a case that 5 isn't the best, the optimal player count. If I said there was one player count that wasn't very good on this, it might be 5. And the reason being, because at 5, there are only 9 gods. And so at 5, the players have the majority, not the bluffs having the majority. And so if you move something else, you are pretty likely 50-50% chance, because there's 4 other people and 4 bluffs, to be moving someone else's piece. And so you might just accidentally give somebody a lot of points, versus when it's a smaller player count, or when you get to 6, it's basically a 3-player count because you're on a team. It becomes 2 teams of 2. You have more bluffs to interact with, and the more bluffing you have, the more fun this game is. That's why I love it at 2 players, because there's only one other pawn that you have to be ahead of. It doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. There's just one pawn. So if I am green and you're pink, it doesn't matter if there are 6 other things ahead of us, as long as green has 2 points and you have 1 point. And I think that back and forth and finding that is very, very exciting. So those are our top 10. I mean, we had, what, 4 honorable mentions at the start, and I'm going to give you a few more honorable mentions that I didn't think I wanted to talk about, but I do want to talk about. Oh, Planet Unknown. Planet Unknown was another one that was on the 6-player list. And for that 6-player list, I tried to get games that played well at 6 players, and so naturally I picked games that also played well at most player counts and replicated this. Planet Unknown is, again, you're doing your own thing. You're taking polyominoes and putting it on your own board, but whoever's turn it is gets to turn the Lazy Susan and give everybody else 2 choices, whereas essentially they have 12 choices for their turn. It's a great game. I really like this game. You're moving up on these tracks, and each planet has its own little trick that you have to navigate, and each track has its own special abilities that it's giving you. Very solid game. Another one that I really do want to bring up, and that maybe should have taken the place of Distilled, is Rising Sun. Rising Sun, with the expansion, plays at 6 players, and I really think, I mean, it's my #1 game of all time, but I am happy to play this game at any player count. And I think, again, because it has the follow action, you'll see up here there are 7 spots, these 7 rectangles. If you're unfamiliar with the game, these are where people will choose their actions. And so if you have a 3-player game, everybody is guaranteed 2 actions, and one person is going to get a 3rd action on each season. If you have a 4-player game, you're going to have a 4 and a 3, and only one person is going to miss out. If you have a 5-player game, 2 people are going to get extra actions, and so do they ally. And then if you have a 6-player game, only one person will get 2 extra actions. And so this balance, now it's a follow action, so everybody gets to take whatever it is, but you get the bonus, the special bonus of doing it. And so this balance drastically changes the game, because it drastically changes how much you are relying on other players. I also find in a 6-player game, the game completely shifts, because money is so scarce. You're not getting a lot of stuff from the harvests, and so your money becomes really valuable, and having that money really helps put you out on top and becomes more valuable. I have seen the intricacies between these. At 4 players, everybody is guaranteed to have an ally, whereas in 3 players and in 5 players, somebody is going to be sitting out. Generally in 4 players, you'll always ally up because it's more beneficial to be an ally at the start of the game. But I love in a 3-player game or a 5-player game seeing who gets left out. I find that works as a really nice balancing mechanic too. And so just navigating that, and there are sets of cards that you can add in. And so finding that balance and feeling the differences between those is really exciting for me. Now, I talk about Rising Sun a lot, so I wanted to make this list a little bit more distinct and not just put Rising Sun on everything, very similar to the 6, but I legitimately think that Rising Sun plays really well at all player counts. Another one was Ticket to Ride. You gotta give it to Ticket to Ride. It plays very well at 2 and 5, and the experiences differ, and the key to that is the double routes. Either allowing them or not. How cramped the board is going to get, I really do like that. It's worth a shout out, but it wasn't going to make the list just because it's Ticket to Ride, and I don't want to put Ticket to Ride on any list because you already know about Ticket to Ride. All right, we've got 3 more in the honorable mention category. The number 3 that we have left is Broom Service. This plays 2 to 5 players, and the game is thus. It's a pick up and deliver game where you're trying to deliver potions and to various towers that want these potions, and you have to collect resources to make these potions, or just collect the potions in general. Doesn't matter. What does matter is that you have a hand of cards, the same hand of cards as everybody else, and you are going to pick a card and put it face down in front of you. You're then going to reveal the card. If you're first player, you're going to reveal the card, and you're going to say, okay, I'm the Field Witch, and I'm going to be a brave Field Witch, because I don't think anybody else around this table has picked the Field Witch as one of their actions to play this round. And then everyone goes around and it goes second player, no, third player, no, fourth player, yes, I actually did play the Field Witch. And so you, having taken the strong action, don't get to take any action. You should have taken the weak action, because then at least you would have gotten to take something. So it's a bit of a push your luck game, or pushing your luck against what everybody else has in front of them as well. And that's where the difference in the player count matters, because it's 2 to 5 players, and this really changes depending upon how many players you have, how many players are interacting. Are you going to be able to push that? Are you going to be able to pick the small action or the strong action? And then whoever takes the last action then has to go first again. So it kind of balances it out in terms of everybody getting a chance to pull the wool over somebody else's eyes. I think it's a really fun little cute game, and absolutely the feeling of it changes depending upon the number of players involved for sure. Next in the honorable mentions, we have City of the Great Machine. City of the Great Machine plays 1 to 4 players. Now it's a lower player count, but the reason I'm putting it on this list is because when I did my review of this game, which you should check out because it's phenomenal, my review, not the game, my reviews, hilarious. No, the game is phenomenal. It's really, really good. I was surprised and very delighted by how good this game was. It was one of those games where I was like, yes, I am so happy when a game works out to be this thing. But I hypothesized that the solo mode wouldn't work very well. And according to all accounts, it does. So that was the thing that I was worried about, and then it works well at 1. And then I also think this experience changes depending on if you have 2 or if you have 4, and I think both work quite well. One of you will always play the Great Machine, who will move the guards around the districts and hope to catch and make it difficult for the revolutionaries. And the other of you, the rest of you, will play the revolutionaries. Now, if there's only one of you, you play all 3 of the revolutionaries. You don't have to consult with anybody. It becomes a nice head-to-head battle. If there's 3 people, well, you have to communicate and coordinate with each other somehow, but the Great Machine is always watching. And so the Great Machine can always look at you and see you gesturing on your cards, be like, yeah, I think we should go there. Okay, well, I'll go there. Maybe you go there, or should we both go there? And listening to these little things that people are saying and picking up on, and maybe saying or slipping to bluff the Great Machine, I think is very, very fun and really changes the dynamic of this experience. And then finally, we have Point Salad. Point Salad is a filler game, but it plays 2 to 6 players, and I think it legitimately plays great at all the player counts as well. At 2 players, you get more of a tense strategic game filler where you have a bit more control. At 6 players, it's kind of a bit of chaos, but it still is a fun time. The premise of this game is that you're going to have these veggie cards and these point scoring cards. And so you'll have the market of veggies where you can take 2 of those veggies, or you can take 1 of these point scoring cards. But whatever you take for the market, it refills using these point scoring cards because every card is double-sided. Every card has a veggie on one side and then has a point condition on the other side. And so if I take this onion, I know that a tomato will be replacing it because there is a tomato on the backside of this particular card. And so at a 6-player game, you can see that it makes no sense to even think about any strategy coming towards you because so much shifts and changes by the time it gets back to you. At a lower player count, not as much shifts and changes, but I find both of these experiences to be equally fun and exciting. So those are the honorable mentions of the best games that play at all their player counts. Drop your list down below. Drop the ones that you think I missed. There are a lot of Euro games that I find in that 2 to 4 player range that play well at the 2 to 4 player range, right? That's why I was trying to vie for higher player counts as well, a little bit more diversity. I mean, like Agricola could have been on this. I'm just looking at my shelf right now. Verdant could have been on that. Cryptid is fine. Red Cathedral is good at all player counts. A lot of these games will play at the full player count range, but what I find is very impressive and what makes the basis of this list is when the game experience changes and both experiences are equally good. That's what I find fascinating about these games, and that's why I wanted to compile them and make them on the list. Although, and that's why kind of Distilled and Earth were a bit of a cheat and earlier on because they didn't deal with that. But something like Mysterium also could be on this list from 2 to 7 players. The experience kind of stays the same, although you have more clues to be given out and more ways of deducing, okay, they gave that clue to this person, so it's not for me, which I think is kind of neat. But yeah, I think these games are really cool in how they play and how well they play at these varied player counts. And they should be commended for being honest, sweet board games and not liars like I know the other ones are. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Chris George. I don't have a catchphrase, but hey, share this video if you want with people who are truth tellers. But don't share it with your liar friends, okay? Because they don't get access to it. It's only to the truth tellers, the soothsayers, and those who care about the integrity of board gaming. That's what we are right now. Thanks for being here. Now go away.